Hello and welcome back to the Okanagan Reader. I'm your host, Jim Bowering. I'm recording this on the laptop in OBS Studio, but I'm using a different microphone, and so I'm doing it in a different position, not the usual position at my other desk. I'm doing it at my writing desk. This is where I normally write the stories I do, and I'm sitting on an exercise ball as I do it. That's how I get my exercise while I'm writing, on an exercise ball. So we're going to see how this turns out. The lighting seems to be pretty okay, and I guess we'll find out what the audio is like after we're done. So, we're on to chapter 21 of Green Comet, the first book in the Green Comet trilogy. In chapter 21, Elgin takes charge and successfully finishes the ball project, where he's fixing Stanton's ball. He plays his first official flashball game and finds out just what level he is at there. Stanton sends him to a planning meeting in his stead. It scares him because he doesn't know anything about planning meetings, and he's afraid that he might not do it properly. But he goes anyway. He meets Nigel, who you will see later on quite often throughout the story, and Winston, who you'll also see. He's a kind of a lovable old guy with a big mouth. And also Francis. This is the first time he meets Francis, his soon-to-be beloved, if he can ever get his shit together. He gets flustered, and he feels awkward, and you can imagine what happens. So that's chapter 21. I hope you enjoy it. Subscribe and like and subscribe. The old story. Well, here we go then.
Chapter 21. Elgin meets Francis. It all went like clockwork. They had the first strut fabricated in 10 days and installed 2 days later. Van and Leica fought and quibbled and worked together as a well-coordinated team. The fabricators were proud and pleased with their work. The ferry crew moved it efficiently and with little fuss, accompanied by a large crowd of onlookers. It was like a parade and a picnic and a midway all at once. Even Galatea was happy, so far as that word could be applied to her. She had the sphere polished to maximum clarity, and she was able to buff in the joint on the strut, even though it had a gap of at least 5 millimeters on one side. The second strut took only a week to fabricate, since they learned what they needed to know on the first one. Another one-day carnival got it moved on site, and this time the assemblers were able to point out to Galatea that there was no gap to speak of before they welded it on. She scowled and muttered, and then subjected their welds to even closer scrutiny. They took her criticism quietly, and left smiling as she set to polishing furiously. They knew the work was good, and they knew that she was as satisfied as she ever would be. By the time they were done, 20 days had passed, and the ball had been available for use on all but 2 of them. It looked good. It was just as Elgin imagined it, the lines flowing smoothly. Everyone had good reason to be proud of their work. The next day they had a ceremony for the reopening of the ball. It lasted all afternoon, and was followed in the evening by a flashball game. After weeks of practice, this would be Elgin's first official game against serious competition. It was not a memorable game for him. Everyone was still better than him. He was behind at every turn. He couldn't keep up to the pace of the game and found himself futilely chasing what he couldn't catch. He couldn't compensate for it by anticipating what they would do, because they were also ahead of him mentally. He found himself out of position whenever he tried to match the speed of the other players, and then they would play right through the opening. By half-time he was exhausted, frustrated, and embarrassed. During the break his teammates tried to encourage him, but he couldn't even look at them. He was letting them down, and he couldn't bear it. Even Buzzard couldn't cajole him out of it. Finally, what he dreaded most, Captain Rita came over to talk to him. He was sure she was going to tell him to sit out the second half. "You'd better pull me, coach," he said, hoping to at least make it easier for her. "I'm obviously out of my league here." "Is that what you want?" she asked. That set him back. He spoke hesitantly, unsure now. "Well, I'm sure not helping the team." "That's not what I asked you," she said, not about to let him duck the question. "I want to know if you're ready to quit." That was hard. This wasn't sympathy, but another test. Would he quit on his team to escape the pain of this situation? Resolve rose instinctively in him. She had exposed his true nature, and he knew he had to pick up the burden and carry it, no matter how ineptly. "No, coach," he said, clamping his teeth to keep the quiver out of his voice. "I won't quit on you." "That's what I wanted to hear," she said. "Now listen." She told him what he was doing wrong, which wasn't easy for him. Still, it was more useful than what he already knew, which was what was going wrong. She also told him what he could do to improve. "You're not as good as the rest of the players. You can't compete at their level yet. I want you to figure out what you're capable of and play within it." The second half was better than the first, but it still wasn't great. Elgin thought about what Rita told him, and he tried to determine the limits of his ability. He decided to visualize the volume of space within which he could be effective. As he flew around the court, he imagined a bubble that he knew he could defend. That helped him play a better positional game, instead of lunging about after the ball and other players. His teammates saw the change and quickly adjusted. Now they knew that they could count on him, controlling his area, and were able to play and plan accordingly. Of course, the opposing team also learned and adapted as well. Elgin still didn't have much of an effect on the course of the game or its outcome. He still wasn't much of an asset to his team, but at least now he wasn't so much of a liability. And by knowing what he could do, and doing it exceedingly well, he took one option away from the other team. They soon learned that there was one path they couldn't take, one sphere of space that they couldn't play through. The Harriers lost the game, but not by as much as they could have. Afterwards, in the room, Elgin's fellow players congratulated him and clapped him on the back. It embarrassed him, because he knew how little he contributed, but it made him feel as if he belonged. He was now really a Harrier. When Buzzard came over, he could tell by his big grinning face that he felt the same way. Both of them chattered excitedly as they flew with the teams for after-game refreshments at a cafe in the square. Members of the other team congratulated them, knowing they were both beginners, especially Elgin, since everyone knew he was a new waker. "You're a natural flyer," they told him. "Stick with it. You'll be glad you did." It took Elgin a few hours to get to sleep that night. The excitement, not only of the completion of the project, but probably more importantly the flashball game, kept his brain buzzing. When he finally did drop off, it was into strange, vivid dreams. He was playing flashball, but he was out among the stars and the ball was ice, 100 meters across. Things got back to normal at work the next day. He and Buzzard got into their routine, and their days became a series of tasks and events with only minor variations. By day they would check the work of the pencil pool, and the evenings were usually taken up by flashball, either practice or games. Stanton congratulated him again on his project. "It looks like you're an engineer after all," he said, with a grin and a wink. It was one of the most beautiful things Elgin had ever heard. What Stanton said next was another. "Rita tells me you'll make a fine flashball player, too." "She said that?" "Yes." "She said I'm a fine player?" Stanton chuckled. "One day," she said. "She told me that you're slow and clumsy now, but one day you'll be fine." Oh. Elgin felt silly, but it didn't last. His captain's vote of confidence buoyed him up. "All the credit goes to her," he said. "She straightened me out and told me what to do." "That's funny," said Stanton. "She said the same thing. She said she gave you a pep talk, but you're the one who went out there and did it." Elgin began to protest, but cut it off. As humble as he felt about his abilities, it still felt churlish to argue with someone being so generous. "She's a very good captain, isn't she?" "One of the best. Now you'd better get back to work." Elgin turned for the door, and Stanton turned to his desk. "Oh, wait," he said. There was one more thing. Elgin stopped and waited at the entrance. I have a planning meeting this afternoon, but I can't make it. I'd like you to go in my place. Me? I don't know anything about that. Then here's your chance to learn. You won't have to talk. I just need you to observe and tell me anything I need to know. Okay, boss. Elgin headed for the table where Buzzard was deep in his work. I'll let you know when it's time to go, said Stanton from the doorway before he went back to work, too. Elgin wondered for a while what going to a planning meeting might entail, but he soon forgot about it as he became immersed in his work. At noon, he and Buzzard went for lunch at the same cafe the teams had used after the game. They reminisced about it while they ate a passable soup and sandwich, then went back to work. He was just handing some papers to Buzzard when Stanton popped his head into the room and told him to finish up and get ready to go. He had nothing to finish up, so he went and freshened up, then presented himself in Stanton's doorway. Ready to go, boss, he said. How do I get there? It's easy to find, said Stanton. It's right on the square. It's on this side, the green side, only it's closer to the red end where we came in the first time. He grinned. Do you remember? Elgin laughed. I think so, he joked. So I used the other corridor? Like the one we used to get here, only on the other side of the big central entrance? That's right. And the planning meetings are held in a room about as far down that corridor as we are down here. It's really obvious once you're there, and there's always a sign set up on meeting days. Stanton was right. It was easy to find. It didn't take long to get there, being no more than a few hundred meters altogether. It seemed a bit longer, because his mind was racing, but he got there in less than 5 minutes. Since he'd gone early so as not to be late, he was there in plenty of time. There was only one other person there when he arrived. There was another young man, perhaps a few years older than Elgin. He didn't catch the name when they introduced themselves. His mind was preoccupied with uncertainty and anticipation. So, your work with Stanton? The young man asked, making polite conversation. Yes, and Buzzard, Elgin replied, his eyes trying to take in every detail of the room. And Stanton sent you here to observe? Yes. Elgin remembered his manners and focused on his companion. He said I could just watch, he said, but I'm still nervous. I know what you mean. It wasn't that long ago that I was in your place. He shrugged. I can't tell you not to be nervous. It doesn't work that way, does it? Elgin shook his head. But I can tell you that you don't need to be. We're all pretty easygoing, and nothing serious happens here. His host pointed out the place where Stanton usually stood, then told him, If you just stick with me, I'll introduce you to everybody as they arrive. There were 6 more people making up the planning board, and Elgin managed to forget the names of most of them as soon as he heard them. Luckily, he could find their names and anything else he needed to know on the network, so for now he could concentrate on them. One person stood out so much that Elgin couldn't help but remember the name. Winston was the senior member of the board, being about twice Elgin's age. He had a commanding presence and an arresting appearance. It was possible to say he looked like a bullfrog without being insulting. He had a big head with a large, wide mouth. His eyes bulged, and his voice was a deep, powerful croak. As he shook Elgin's hand, it was obvious that he was assessing and categorizing. Let's get started, shall we? Said Winston. But we're not all here yet, said Elgin's guide. She'll get here when she gets here. We can't keep delaying these meetings to suit her schedule. But couldn't we wait just a minute? It's not that late. She knows when we start. She can learn to be on time. Come on, Winston. She's never very late. Winston was about to reply when Elgin heard the most beautiful music. But it wasn't music playing. No real music could ever sound this good. It was someone speaking. It was a woman's voice, and it was saying, Thank you, Nigel, but Winston's right. I should learn to be on time. Elgin looked, and it was as if a golden light had entered the room. She looked like the idea of woman, not just the reality. Her proportions, her parts, the way she carried herself created the impression that she was representing that idea, not just coming into the room. Her fur was a rich golden brown. Her eyes were also golden. Even her tapitums reflected gold. She spoke again, and it was the rightest thing he had ever heard. "I'm sorry I'm late, everyone," she said, and it sounded to him like all the tones of a perfect symphony. It tasted like ice berries. "This is Francis," said his host, whose name he now remembered was Nigel. "Francis," he called, "come and meet Stanton's representative. This is Elgin." "I'm pleased to meet you, Elgin," she said, taking his hand. She looked directly into his eyes, and he got the feeling that she really was pleased to meet him. He must have said something, but he wasn't aware of it. She went and sat down next to Winston, and he appeared mollified when she put her hand on his arm and leaned in to apologize. The meeting got under way and carried on for a couple of hours, but Elgin couldn't say what they talked about. It was a good thing he wasn't expected to contribute because his mind was empty. Stanton would have to read the minutes to find out what went on. Elgin was aware only of her golden light and music, the rightness of her voice. When she stopped and someone else spoke, all he felt was a restless impatience for the return of beauty. Eventually a slow transition took place. Instead of hearing music overwhelm her words when she spoke, he began to hear her voice accompanied by the music. Then he was able to hear her talking, and the music became the background. The beauty was still there, but now he was no longer lost in it. He could hear what she was saying. She was talking about the large, long-distance corridors they were planning, mainly for transportation and future growth. "Our engineers could calculate what radius the corridors should curve on to match the gravity of the comet. If we get it right, then traffic, by going the right speed, could be effectively in orbit around the center of the comet and not need to continually correct its flight path." It sounded reasonable to Elgin. In fact, he thought it sounded brilliant. Most importantly, it sounded right. The tones were pure, and the music was sweet, but it screeched to a halt when someone else spoke. It was Winston. He was saying, "This is a nice idea, but it's quite fanciful, isn't it? It's more difficult, not to mention the added costs. No, I think we should go with straight corridors, as we've always done." Elgin could picture him saying, "Harumph." The change from beauty to ugliness jarred Elgin so much that he blurted, "She's right!" In the oddly echoing silence that followed, he tried to shrink back into obscurity. Winston was staring, no, glaring at him, his large mouth open in shock. There was a quiet wave of tittering around the table. Worst, though, was seeing Francis smiling at him. He felt as if his face was swelling, and he knew he was blushing copiously. He thought he must look a complete fool. He knew he was right. He knew she was right. But when would he ever learn to say it tactfully? The man who'd helped him earlier, Nigel, suggested that they should present the idea to engineering for analysis. Once they had some numbers to work with, they could discuss it at a future meeting. His idea was quickly adopted, and they moved on with relief. Soon after that, the meeting concluded, and Elgin rushed out of there. Francis looked as if she wanted to talk to him, so he fled before that could happen. Elgin wished he could forget about it. He hoped he would never have to go back there, never have to face any of those people again, but that wasn't up to him either. When Stanton listened to his report of the meeting, he said, "Is that all that happened?" And Elgin had to tell the whole story. Stanton said, "So, after Francis got there, you didn't hear what anyone said for a while?" Elgin was blushing again. "Yes," he said. Stanton nodded. "She is an attractive woman," he said, "but I can't say she's ever done that to me." But what she said about the curving corridors, that was right. Elgin forgot about his personal discomfort. "I could tell that. She was right." "And you're sure that's not just because she's so gorgeous?" "No, yes, I'm sure. I can tell the difference." "I'll take that into account when we get the request," said Stanton, "but we'll still have to treat it like any other." He smiled. "And you can do the proposal." His smile widened. "Right. You can start today. Take as long as you need, then give it to Buzzard." Elgin liked that. He was looking forward to burying himself in work and forgetting this embarrassing day. But it wasn't going to be that easy. "And you can present it at the next planning meeting." Elgin sighed. Yet another test. But it was a month before that would happen. He had the plans for the curving corridors done in one day, but he kept them back so he could make sure they were perfect. Even so, when he gave them to Buzzard a day later, he was still nervous and uncertain. He was doing it for Frances, and that made him want to do it perfectly, even if she did think he was a fool. He hovered. When Buzzard glowered at him, he flew over to the galley, but before he knew it, he was hovering again. He stuck a cup of coffee on the table for Buzzard and ended up reading over his shoulder. That was when he was banished from the shop and told not to come back until he was called. He left the room, but he didn't go anywhere. He waited in the hallway, doing the microgravity equivalent of pacing. Finally, he was invited back in. Buzzard told him it was all done, all good, and Stanton was looking it over. A few minutes later, he was in the office getting Stanton's assessment. His boss told him that it was a viable plan, but that he'd have to sell it right, especially to Winston. Emphasize that it's not much more difficult to do it this way, and well worth the benefits. A smooth, continuous curve means no angled joints between straight sections, and people will appreciate the ease of use for years to come. That sounds good, said Elgin. Couldn't you tell them? No, said Stanton. This is your baby. He and Buzzard checked a lot of work that month, and they played a lot of flashball. The work became routine, repetitive, and predictable, but never boring. The scale and novelty of it, the excitement of being involved in joining two huge comets, made boredom an impossibility. Flashball also became more routine as they got more experience. It got so they knew what they had to do without being told. They inched their way toward the level of competence enjoyed effortlessly by the veterans on the team. Most gratifying to Rita was how Elgin's sphere steadily grew. She watched as he mastered one level and moved up to the next, always working within what he was capable of, but always pushing himself to improve. He needed to have the same strength of character to take himself to the planning meeting. He imagined flying in there and seeing everyone looking at him. He repeatedly rehearsed the dismissive disdain Winston would show his presentation. But worst was the combination of amusement, pity, and disappointment he knew he would see in the face of Frances. To avoid being the center of attention, he decided to arrive early again. Like last time, there was one other person there already, so he and Nigel made polite conversation while they waited. Unlike last time, Frances arrived a few minutes early. She greeted them, saying, "I didn't want to be scolded by Winston again." Everyone laughed, even Elgin, though he did it with some effort. She tried to engage with him, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Any distraction was sufficient excuse for him to avoid looking at her, and Winston's arrival was actually a relief. He was the last one, and Frances greeted him with, "At last! We were beginning to wonder if you remembered what time the meeting started." That raised a round of laughter, but none of it was cruel. It was meant to include Winston, not to single him out. He tried to be aloof, even to look miffed. Once again, Elgin expected him to say, "Harumph." But he couldn't do it. That was a talent Frances had. She could make people feel special by her gentle, easy ways. The meeting got underway and progressed smoothly. Once again, Elgin was strictly an observer. Stanton hadn't given him any issues to raise, and there weren't any reports to read. He just had to stand there, listening and observing, waiting anxiously for the end of the meeting when he would give his presentation on the curved corridors. He was nervous and distracted, but this time he was able to follow what was going on, even when she was speaking. At least this time, he would be able to report to Stanton. Finally, everything was done, and it was his turn. He took the lessons learned in flashball and made his presentation simple and clear. He knew he didn't have the persuasive powers of an orator, so he concentrated on clearly conveying a few easily understood facts. Toward the end of his talk, he had a visual presentation of how the curving corridors might be used. He had no talent in that area, but Buzzard knew a guy, and it actually looked pretty good. He followed Stanton's advice and concentrated on the practical aspects of it, and by the time he was done he had a sense that they were with him. Even Winston was nodding, and he wasn't wearing his harumph face. They had a quick vote and decided to send it back to engineering for preliminary work. They would look at it again when a more comprehensive plan was ready. Everyone came up to him afterward and congratulated him. They praised the directness and simplicity of his talk. Even I could follow it for a change, they laughed. They hoped that future submissions from engineering could be as clear and not so full of numbers. Elgin was relieved and happy, so he was still smiling when Frances appeared in front of him. At least if you're going to be stuck with an expression frozen on your face, he thought, a smile is not bad. She touched his arm and thanked him. It was just the way I imagined it, she said. How did you know what I was thinking? Oh, he said, He wrestled the stupid smile off his face and forced himself to speak. It's not that hard, he said. Once you have the numbers, it pretty well shows you what's possible. I think you're being too modest, she said. There are a lot of ways to get that across, but you picked the one that was in my mind. He was blushing again. Well, I just kept in mind what you said when you first brought it up. She was looking right in his eyes. Somehow he knew she really cared what he thought, and that she would know if he tried to gloss it over. While I was working, I kept your description right there, to compare to the plan as I went along. I could tell when it was right or not. Stanton has told me about that, she said. Your talent for knowing when things are right, I mean. You've talked to Stanton? Oh, yes, we talk all the time. We're friends. I mean about me. You talked to Stanton about me? She smiled, and he felt as if his mother was stroking his hair. She told him, of course we talked about you. He was sending you here, so naturally I was curious. Then she said something that changed his life. And he's proud of you, so he naturally wants to brag. He brags about me? Elgin had thought he was barely scraping by, that he was lucky to have passed the tests. Learning that Stanton was proud of him changed that. Yes, he does. He says you'll probably end up being as much use to him as Buzzard, and that's saying a lot because I think Buzzard is like a son to him. That made Elgin feel good. He didn't feel like the new guy anymore. Now he felt like part of the team. Almost as good as Buzzard, he mused. He wasn't really comparing you, she said. You have different talents that he combines to make you both better. She searched his face to be sure she hadn't inadvertently made things worse. She liked him, and she also valued Stanton's opinion of him. She hoped they could be friends. Something changed, though, and Elgin went back to feeling uncomfortable and awkward. He wanted to leave, and he did as soon as he could manage it. As he hastily bustled out of there, he didn't see Frances's hurt and disappointment. He only wanted to stop wasting her time, so she could get on with more important things.